Clemson to the Big 12 last week felt like just a rumor, but now it might actually be picking up a little bit of steam.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Locked On Clemson podcast. I'm your host, John Bivens. Thanks so much for following and listening here and letting today your first listen be here on the Locked On Clemson podcast. You can follow us over on Twitter at I am John Bivens. We are a part of the amazing Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. When you're listening to Locked On Clemson, you're getting three things. You're getting all sports, all passion, and all of the time. Today is Monday, July 15th. We're going to be talking all about Clemson moving to the Big 12, talking about how serious of a move that is, what's the history of Clemson with Big 12 opponents, and then the travel schedule. What's it look like now, and what might it look like against the Big 12 if we move to that conference? We've got a great show for you today. We are brought to you by Gametime. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Before we dive in, if you're an everyday or if you are a faithful listener of the show, you might notice our background's a little bit different. We figured we'd give you, if you are video listeners, if you're audio, hopefully it sounds the same. Hopefully it's still the same content for you. But if you are video, we do have a little background. We figured we'd give you a little bit something different to look at rather than just another boring background. So what do we have behind us? Just explain everything a little bit real quick. Down below me over here, got some moons. We made those. My wife and I made all those. It's just, I don't know. I like space. That self-explanatory there. Up top, we got a Clemson Tiger Wire flag. Clemson Tiger Wire is the organization that we started. We put out blogs when the season starts. We try to put out daily blogs. It also started our first podcast. So we originally had a podcast called the Clemson Tiger Wire Podcast. We partnered with a different organization, and then Locked On came on, and we just really love what Locked On is doing. Locked On, that's your team every day, where they have over 200 different shows. They approached us about coming on and joining the Tiger Wire, joining Locked On Clemson, and that happened back end of April, I believe, and so we are officially with them, but we still have that organization. That is what we are credentialed media through for our blogs, for our written content. And so if you are looking for more of a deep dive other than just podcast, make sure you head over to thetigerwire.com. That way we can come out across. We'll give out some blogs. Again, we haven't posted any for a little bit. Those are mainly in-season blogs. So that should be starting the beginning of August when we start putting out blogs again. So there's that. We got a little shelf back there, Rubik's Cube. Just why not? Got a little Dundee Award up there for hottest in the office. Yeah, my wife won that. I did not. I wish I could. And then the big black flag over here, that is our bachelor's alma mater. That is Tusculum University. We graduated there back years ago. That's where we received our undergraduate degree. So, so that's a little bit behind it. Hopefully it's a little prettier for you rather than just the blank corner that we have been recording in. But anyway, let's dive into the episode. Let's dive into the stuff you want to talk about. So last week, we talked about the Big 12 was just a rumor. How it was like, there was some Clemson seems like they're leaving the conference. It seems like Clemson's leaving the ACC. But what grounds were they? What movement was happening? What could we expect? And so we talked about that. But now, over the weekend and today, it seems like this Clemson to the Big 12 is more than just another rumor. It's more than just another, they're going to go. It's starting, it seems like it's picking up a little bit of steam. Big 12 became a serious candidate for where Clemson's going to land. Jason Scheer, who's a Big 12 insider, he writes for Arizona, and he does a lot of content for the Big 12. He put out a tweet that said there is belief inside the conference that Clemson and FSU will join the conference in the next year. So within a year, that's a Big 12 insider. Now it seems like it's picking up a little bit of steam. So what all does that mean? Is it realistic or is it not? Well, let's just go through it. It seems like Clemson and FSU is leaving the ACC for the money. They're not doing it for travel. They're not doing it for rivalries. It seems like they are doing this solely for the money, because really when they became upset was the new rights would break down between distribution of funds and TV agreements between the four major conferences. So here's the money breakdowns. On average, the SEC and the Big Ten pay their schools around $70 million a year in distribution. These numbers are all very rough. You'll find exact numbers different on different whatever website you look at. So these are all rough numbers, but the picture is there. Big 12, SEC, or Big 10 and SEC pay their schools about $70 million a year this upcoming year. Big 12, they're expected to pay their schools about $42.5 million a year, and then the ACC is expected to pay just that mid to high $30 million, like $37, $39 million a year. So if that's the case, why would Clemson and FSU leave the ACC to go to make a lateral move pretty much to just get a small increase going to the Big 12? It doesn't seem realistic. It doesn't seem like that is that huge of an option. I mean, just very recently, Oklahoma, Texas, they left the Big 12 to go to the SEC because the distribution was so much larger. So Clemson, if you're looking at Texas and Oklahoma, Clemson's on the same level as them. I would put Clemson and Texas here, Oklahoma just a little bit below them based on national championships. And in recent years, Clemson's higher than Texas. I mean, just look at national champions. So if that's the case, why would they go to a conference that the schools that are on the same level as them left to make more money? That just doesn't make sense. There's no value there. And so that brings in what's saving them, what's having them more money, what's having them have the interest of bringing it. And that's this part. There is serious rumors about a private equity, people providing money that are outside the Big 12, coming in, paying them more, that they would receive, the people giving money would receive some benefits, which we'll get to in a second, but that money would then go to help pay for Clemson and FSU and the other schools in this conference. And the reports we're seeing is this. The reports we're seeing is that this private equity would provide some money for a lot of different things. Number one, they would pay for the buyout of Clemson and FSU to leave the ACC. That's a hefty sum. That is a lot of money they're having to pay. So if ACC and FSU, if they win their agreements, if all court cases go how the schools want them to, Clemson and FSU will have to pay to leave the ACC, and then they'd have to enter the next conference. So they're talking about this private equity would come and pay for Clemson and FSU to leave the ACC. It's also saying this. There's been a couple reports that are coming out and saying that Clemson and FSU would make almost double what they're making in the ACC. Almost double it. That puts it in like SEC Big 10 conference, like that kind of distribution. So it would increase the funds dramatically. It would provide so much more money there. But you got to look at that and think, all right, well, what if it would Big 12? It was Big 12 and all other current schools there. How are they going to feel if Clemson and FSU come in? They're brand new schools to the conference. Big 12, they're from a different region. Most of the region is Midwest, a little bit south, some on the eastern side, but with that kind of vibe, how would those schools feel about them coming in and making significantly 10 to 20, maybe more than $20 million more than the rest of the schools? You got to think there's some problems there. You got to think those universities might have a problem there. I don't see how the Big 12 would be okay with that. But then there's other reports saying that Big 12, Clemson FSU would definitely make the most money in the Big 12, but each of the current schools would also receive a $15 million increase per school. So if that's the case, that $40 million would now go to $55. Clemson and FSU making probably in the $60-65 range. That's competitive with the SEC and Big 10. If that can happen, that makes a lot of sense. That would make so much sense on why Clemson and FSU are going through this whole battle, going through this whole problem. But then you got to think, what is the private equity? What are they receiving? The people that come in and are giving the Big 12 this money, well, it said they'd receive naming rights. That is massive. That has never happened in this college football before. As far as I know, that's never happened in the college sports. For them to come in and now, not only do they get a sponsor, nothing like that, they get to name the conference. Meaning if Dr. Pepper's doing this would now be the Dr. Pepper Conference. I doubt it's a business like that, but you never know. Like they could pick exactly what the name of the conference is. It could be the Cheez-It Conference. You know what? That's crazy. That is wild. Could you imagine? Now you're not only playing in like bowl games, but you're also playing in the Walmart championship battle. You know, like it's crazy the amount of things that could happen here, the amount of things that could happen. So naming rights will be up to grab. Huge sponsorships would be up to grab. This is a massive deal. So we're not there yet. We're not at the point where Clemson is definitely joining the Big 12. I don't think we can say that yet. You never know. That might change in the next week. But we're not there yet, but we definitely are more than just a rumor. This is becoming more than just fan people putting on Twitter, oh yeah, Clemson's moving. This has become more than just troll people putting on engagement clicks, tweets about trying to get people to grow. It's more than that. This is becoming a serious rumor where there's a high chance that Clemson and FSU are in the Big 12 next year. So, with that being said, what is the history? Has Clemson played a lot of Big 12 opponents? We'll dive into that and more in just a moment right after this break. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Locked On Clemson podcast. Hey, we are so excited about the future. We're excited about what's going to happen. We do want to let you know about a new program that we are so excited to kick off later this week. We are going to be offering a new program for all of our insiders. So if you want to become an insider member of the Locked On Clemson podcast, listen up, because here's what we're doing. Locked On has partnered with a company called Subtext. But what that means is we're going to offer you unique and things that only insiders get. So if you want to text with me one-on-one, we'll share that with you. You'll have an option to do that. If you want to send in questions, where only people that are insider programs can send in questions that we'll read on the show and we'll talk about it on the show, this is that program. We're also going to be creating video content like film. We're going to dive in and look at some film on specific players and put a video content together all about that film. Or we're going to put in different bonus episodes with mailbag episodes answering all your questions. There's going to be bonus content for all of our insiders a part of Locked On Clemson. So if you want to join the insider program, be on the lookout. Later this week, we're going to launch that program. And it's very cheap. It's $5 a month, 14 days for free, just so you can try it out. So we'll be releasing more details and content regarding all of that and more here in the next couple days, so make sure you're on the lookout for that. But Clemson to the Big 12 is becoming a little bit more serious. It's starting to get a little steam, starting to get a little bit of movement. What is that? What's the history of that? Clemson is definitely a serious opponent in the ACC. All-time record for Clemson in the ACC is 344 wins, 153 losses, and 6 ties. Since 2010, the season, they're 102 wins to 19 losses. Clemson is very talented, arguably dominating the ACC, very historically successful, right? So if that's the case, what's their history look like in the Big 12? So I'm not going against every time they've played an opponent in the Big 12. I'm going against the opponents that are currently in the Big 12. Does that make sense? So like Texas, Oklahoma used to be in the Big 12. I'm not going Clemson's record against them when they're in the Big 12 because they're no longer in the Big 12. That's irrelevant right now. But against the schools in the Big 12, here's what they are. So let's go through them. Arizona State, they've never played. Arizona, they've never played. BYU, they've never played. Baylor, we've played one time, 1979. We lost 24-18. All right. Cincinnati, never played. Colorado, we are 1-1 against. In 2005 was our latest matchup. Clemson won 19-13, I believe. And then in 1957, Colorado won 27-21. So, all right. So far we are 1-2. Houston, we've never played. Iowa State, we are 1-0. We played in 2021. We won 20-13. All right, so we're 2-2. I'm sorry, 2-2. Houston, never played. Or sorry, where you said that? Kansas, we've never played. Kansas State, never played. Oklahoma State, never played. TCU, Texas Christian University. We are 2-2. Texas Christian won their last matchup in 2009. Then our last matchup before that was 1965, and a couple matchups in the 50s. Texas Tech, we are 0-1. We lost 55-15 in 2002. UCF, we are 1-0. We won 21-13 in 2001. Utah, we have never played. And West Virginia, we are 1-1. That horrible loss in 2012, 70-33. And then Clemson won 27-7 in 1989. What does that say? Not much. It shows that our history against the Big Ten is a huge, huge question mark. Overall, we are 6-6 all time against these teams. Only one of those games has fell in the past 11 years, 2 of them in the past 15. What does that tell us? It tells us Clemson, if they make this move, if the money works out, if all the conference realignment works, if the lawsuits go how it goes, if everything works out how it's supposed to, and Clemson leaves, they are leaving a conference where they have dominated. They're leaving a conference where they have proven success, proven they can win the championships, proven that can lead to national championships. They're leaving a conference with proven history and success to go to one that they just don't know. Now, if you go through these programs, there's most of them, Clemson is on a higher level than. You know, like if you go through all these universities, Clemson is playing at a higher level than almost all of them. I could have the argument for every single school on here. Clemson has a they're playing at a higher level, especially the past 10 years. If you compare all these schools to the past 10 years of Clemson, Clemson's better than every single one of them. So that provides another move. If that's the history against them, if that's the history with the Big 12, the history against it, why is Clemson making another lateral move where they're going from a conference with not a lot of football prowess to now a conference with not a lot of football prowess? Well, one of the arguments might be for basketball. Big 12 basketball is really, really talented, but ACC basketball is too with North Carolina and Duke. So the thing is this. When you look at the history of it, when you look at where the history of Clemson versus the ACC with that huge winning percentage, those 344 wins, 153 losses, that in the last 121 games, we've only lost 19 of them. In that history, with having that kind of history, to be able to go through and make the move to where now we're playing a bunch of schools that we've only played 12 times since like 1950, that's a big, big question mark. But it just shows you can't be afraid. You can't be afraid to make a move. You can't be afraid of the competition. And I don't think Clemson is. I don't think Dabo Swinney is. But it's always interesting to dive in and look at the history. So now we've talked about if the Big 12, going to Big 12 is serious. We've talked about the history against the Big 12. Now Clemson this year is one of the lowest traveled teams in the nation when it comes to Power 4 conferences. Would we still have that kind of travel record if we went to the Big 12? We'll talk about that and more in just a second. So one big thing we have to talk about is ACC. They obviously just added 3 new schools. They added Stanford out in California. They added California out in California, obviously. And they added SMU down in Texas. With the addition of those 3 schools, mileage on average for the ACC skyrocketed this year. I mean, it became a massive thing where teams are now traveling. Teams are moving. They're having to go different states. They're having to cross borders for multiple states in one travel multiple times. When it goes through the ACC schools, here's how the ACC schools that travel the most this year. So number 1, California Golden Bears are traveling almost 21,000 miles this year. That is a lot. That is a lot of traveling. Stanford is traveling 14,000 miles. FSU is traveling 13,000. Georgia Tech 13,000. Miami 11,500. SMU 11,300. Syracuse 11,100, Boston College just under 10,000, Virginia Tech just about 8,500, Louisville 7,500, North Carolina, and then there's a lower. North Carolina's at 5,000. Pittsburgh and Duke and Virginia are all around that 4,000 mark, and then Clemson is the lowest traveled school in the ACC, where this upcoming season, we only have to travel 2,472 miles. That is nothing. That is not a lot of traveling at all. So our schedule this year, we got Georgia, Appalachian State, North Carolina State, Stanford, at Florida State, at Wake Forest, Virginia, Louisville, at Virginia Tech, at Pittsburgh, the Citadel, and South Carolina. So if you take that and you average, all right, so we have 12 games. If you divide that 2,400 by 12, that means on average, we're averaging just over 200 miles per game. That's nothing. That is not a lot of traveling at all. When especially you heard us say, California's traveling 20,000 miles this year. 20,000 compared to we are traveling a tenth of what California's traveling. That is so beneficial because you got to think, oh, what does it matter? They're just hopping on a plane. They're just hopping on a bus. What does travel matter? Travel's a big deal because now you got to think about how much time they have to prepare. If you have a Saturday noon game and you're driving an hour down the road, you can leave Saturday morning or even late Friday night. If you're traveling to California, if California's going to North Carolina, if that's the case, they've got to have at least a whole day of travel, plus time with all the time differences and the time zones and all that. It becomes a huge, massive deal where preparation, a part of your everyday preparation, becomes this travel initiative rather than just being able to drive from Clemson down to Columbia. You know what I mean? So it becomes this huge deal of traveling and how much you're having how far you're having to go to play. Would that change in the Big 12? Obviously, with the ACC, it's going to change a little bit now with schools having to go to California and Texas once or twice a year. That's going to increase it, obviously. I mean, Clemson going to California would greatly increase the distance they travel every single year. I mean, just a rough estimate, it's about 2,000 miles from Clemson, South Carolina to California. So if we went to California once this year, it would double our miles for this season. So, but even then, we're still under 5,000 compared to that 20,000. You see, there's the difference. That's the difference in traveling. So if Clemson's having to travel some, next year might have to travel a little bit more, maybe get to that 6,000 mark with traveling a little bit more. What would Big 12 be like? What is Big 12 going to look like? Well, the Big 12 schools this year, their highest travel team is UCF in Florida, which would be the closest team to Clemson, traveled 14,000 miles. BYU is next, traveling 12,000. West Virginia, which is the second closest school, is traveling about 10,500 miles. So the lowest school traveling is Kansas State, which is nowhere near Clemson. So with that being the case, what does that tell us? That tells us if Clemson does make this move to the Big 12, all of a sudden traveling becomes a huge issue. Not really a huge issue, but it becomes something that they're going to have to worry on. They're now going to have to focus on what's our traveling preparations. They're going to be traveling from 2,400 to 10,000 at the minimum would be my guess. That's 4 times as much. They're going to be spending 4 times as much money on travel, as much time in travel. They're going to be spending so much more traveling. And you're saying, oh, well, you don't know that schedule's changed. Well, just look at the Big 12 schools. The Big 12 schools, right now, Clemson's playing schools in Virginia, in North Carolina, in South Carolina, in Florida, and they're playing schools all on this southeastern coast. Well, if they go to the Big 12, now they're having to play some schools in Texas, in Oklahoma, in Kansas, in Ohio, still in Florida, in West Virginia. Our schools, we now no longer would play North Carolina schools. I'm sure we'd have the occasional rivalry game, right? And then we'd probably keep South Carolina game every single year. We keep that game in Columbia. But outside of that, we're no longer staying just in this little region that we've been. I guess it's over here. But we're no longer staying in this little region that we've been in. We're now moving to where we'd be going to the Midwest. We'd be going to Texas. We'd be going to Oklahoma. We'd be going out in that area, which we never go to right now. We never travel that far. So if this move to the Big 12 is serious, if Clemson ends up, the lawsuits go the way they want it to, if that continues to happen, traveling is going to become a part of the school, a part of the tradition, a part of who Clemson is. That's going to make them have to consider that so much more than they are right now. And so that's something to think about. Is the money we're going to make going to equal all the traveling spending that we're going to have to do? Is that going to be worth it with the preparation, the low of preparation you're going to have? It's a lot of questions. Right now, it doesn't seem like that's a mark that they're really worried about. I mean, when you look at Clemson, what are they looking at leaving there? Well, ACC is the best conference for them when it comes down to moving. So if that's the case, it doesn't seem like traveling's a big initiative for them, but it definitely would be something that would have to change. And so moving forward, we're excited to see what happens. We're going to keep tracking what happens is with this court case. I'm still curious. My belief is that Clemson has a landing spot outside this. I don't believe that they would go and have this court case. They would go through all this deal without knowing that they have somewhere to land outside of that. But I recently was talking to a friend of mine, and he mentioned the possibility of how Clemson is doing this court case just to make sure that the ACC knows we need you to bring in more money. So it's saying, hey, we have the ability to leave. We have the potential. We have the opportunities to leave this conference at any time. We need you to go and do whatever you can to bring in more money, to bring in more distribution, to give us what we need. If not, we're out of here. So that's an interesting thought. Is Clemson doing all this? Is Clemson having this thought to leave, to go to a different conference? Or are they doing it to try to show the ACC, hey, don't call our bluff because we'll leave. We're not bluffing. We will leave. We need you to bring in more money. Whether that's bringing in a private equity like Big 12's talking about. Could you imagine the ACC still being the ACC, but it being called something different? That's an interesting storyline. That's something that could definitely be interesting to watch and follow. And we're going to talk about that more on later this week as we dive into more content. Also, Wednesday this week, we're going to talk about college football. We're doing a whole episode. That game releases, early release comes out the 16th. So we're going to be putting out all that content Wednesday for you, giving you a deep dive look into what Clemson looks like, all that kind of topic. We're excited about all that. So this week's going to be a great week for a Locked On Clemson podcast. Make sure you're here listening every single time. We are so glad that you spend this time in your first listen here on Locked On Clemson. Let us know your thoughts about today. That's going to wrap up this edition. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your feedback. Reach out to us over on Twitter at @IamJohnBivens. Leave a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment there. If you're an audio listener, it would help us out so much if you could leave a review. 5-star review would be amazing, and we'd be so appreciative of that. If you haven't, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast wherever you're listening. That way your first listen every single day can be here on the Locked On Clemson podcast. Make sure to check out other podcasts from the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. We can't wait to see you tomorrow on the next episode of this podcast. Until then, though, keep that Tiger pride alive and roaring, and as always, go Tigers.